had never been easy to be a Tannarak, and thus a member of the most illustrious species that had ever graced the cosmos. Pograk's masculine progenitor, now the equal above all Tannarak, had explained this many times. Tannarak had to be strong in victory, unrelenting in conquest, and wise in rulership. It was their progenitors-granted destiny, which meant any lesser beings attempting to prevent such a thing from coming to pass were to be punished with all due force. So it had been for time immemorial, and so it would be for the rest of eternity. Or so the Tannarak had believed until about 15 standard stellar cycles ago. That was when their stealth scout ships had finally uncovered the location of Faz'reep, the homeworld of the tentacled cold zoners with the unpronounceable species name. They were wise in the sciences to the point that their ships were much faster than equivalent Tannarak vessels. Conquering the Faz'reepi and co-opting their scientists toward improving the capabilities of Tannarak warships would be a good and efficient use for them. All what use was an unconquered species if they were not working toward the betterment of Tannarak. Pograk had been barely a hatchling by then, but the story of what happened next was known by all Tannarak. When the glorious liberation fleet neared the Faz'reep system, they were hailed by Faz'reepi ships and ordered to reverse course. The Commander Prime Ultra, the previous Tannarak leader, had ignored the babblings of the lesser creatures and continued onward. That was when another hail came in, conveyed via what turned out to be a faster-than-light communications link from the surface of a distant planet. Through this link, the Commander Prime Ultra's crew and all Tannarak were introduced to humans embodied in the deceptively slender then Ensign Serena Hernandez. The commander's initial contempt had turned to trepidation when it was revealed that she was a Hellzoner who poured molten magma over her brain case to cool it down, into outright fear when the Faz'reepi explained they'd freely given humans access to their FDL technology. What followed after that was the most terrifying message the Tannarak species had ever received. We have a little saying here on Earth: fuck around and find out. If you think you're tough enough, come right ahead. We will stand by our allies and we will kick your asses. Your call, from any other species, it would have been dismissed as mere noise-making. Nobody was a more martial species than the Tannarak. No cold zone species could survive in the temperatures they could, and few could withstand their weapons. Humans, apparently just as martially inclined as the Tannarak, survived and even thrived in temperatures where dihydrogen monoxide was a liquid, where the terrifying glare of their stellar primary cast a distinct shadow that bespoke a hilariously ridiculous level of resistance to energy weapons, but none of the Tannarak were. Laughing, the threat, spoken with force and intent, had been enough to cause the Commander Prime Ultra to give orders to return to Tannarak space. He had later repented of his initial reaction and sought to drive a wedge between the human and Faz'reepi factions by dispatching a team to assassinate Serena Hernandez on her first visit to Faz'reep. The attacking party never reported back, but the Faz'reepi had returned a few mostly destroyed remains with the explanation that Lieutenant Hernandez had single-handedly destroyed the raiding team, as well as the mountain they were hiding behind. The subtext, clear even to the Tannarak, was the next time we'll send her to speak to you. The Commander Prime Ultra should have left well enough alone, but he had not clawed his way to that level of power without a certain level of bloody-mindedness, and he was in the middle of planning another attack when Pograk's progenitor led the coup that toppled the current Tannarak regime and installed a much more moderate one. So moderate, in fact, that it bordered on near heretical levels of pacifism. The equal above all, when cautiously queried on this, had explained matters quite succinctly. Until the humans arrived on the scene, Tannarak had been able to stomp where they liked, and the cold zoners had been obliged to allow them to do just that. But the humans were able to stomp a lot harder and showed a ready willingness to do so, especially in defense of their allies, the Faz'reepi. As such, the humans utterly unstoppable and the Faz'reepi equally unstoppable. By proxy were the powers in the galaxy. In order to regain some of their previous stomping ability, Tannarak were going to have to do something they'd never done before. They needed to offer alliance with the Faz'reepi. Once accepted, they could then offer alliance with the humans, who were rumored to be able to work all kinds of high-temperature materials, up to and including, though it was probably a cruel jest, iron. Once again, Tannarak ships approached the Faz'reepi system, but this time they shut down their drives and waited, transmitting a radio beacon. When Faz'reepi vessels came out to investigate, the Tannarak ships cut loose transport modules containing entire shiploads of minerals the Faz'reepi found valuable. For the message that the minerals were an offer of alliance, the Tannarak ships had departed. It had worked, after a fashion. Somewhat bemused, the Faz'reepi accepted the minerals and the offer of alliance, which led to the next step, allying with humans. It had been discovered through careful scanning of Faz'reepi communications that there was a Faz'reepi child on Earth, the human planet. She was no doubt being held separate from the rest of her kind, to ensure the cooperation of the Faz'reepi working with human scientists. It was a very Tannarak tactic. They had done much the same in centuries gone by. If the Tannarak were to gain the same level of ingratiation the equal above all had decided, they would have to do the same only with a higher-ranking hostage, and that was where Pograk came in. "You're not too hot?" asked Wicca, perambulating over the ice in her decorated tentacle socks, with a protective outer covering to repel the weak sunlight. Pograk, on the other hand, was in his element. The Tannarak guard was carrying his coat while the pair explored the upper surface of Triton. "I feel no discomfort," Pograk replied. "Tannarak are hardier than Faz'reepi. You should know that. But why are your tentacle socks so colorful?" Wicca took a moment to extend one of her motive tentacles and admire the images that had been woven into the design. "I don't know whose idea it was, but some of the humans saw us with ordinary socks and gave us the decorated ones. I was given this set when I got here. They're very pretty, aren't they?" Pograk wasn't sure if he was supposed to admire pretty things. He'd always been taught that the physical beauty of an object was immaterial next to its utility. "I would not know. Do not require such things," she responded with a tentacle flip that indicated as far as he understood Faz'reepi body language. Mild exasperation. "Wow, haven't you ever wanted to do something just for fun? Or does your dad keep you locked in a box until he needs to bring you out? To show people that you exist, my progenitor does not keep me in prison," he protested. "I have a fulfilling life. He has been teaching me the important aspects of Tannarak society." Before Wicca could reply, Pograk's progenitor spoke over his mini-comm unit. "Return to the ship at once. It is time to leave." "Yes, father," he replied. At the same time, he saw Wicca responding to her own comm unit and the guards doing the same. They all turned and moved back toward the hole that had been sunk into the icy surface of Triton to create the spaceport. It was a very well-constructed base, and he had enjoyed the sojourn on the surface even if Wicca would insist on asking strange and awkward questions. Locked into a box until he was needed, indeed. What other fancies did she entertain within her brain case as they descended the staircase into the base proper? He accepted the coat from the Tannarak guard and put it back on again to ward against the chill. At the same time, Wicca removed her reflective garb and passed it to her guard. She kept the tentacle socks on, though his father did not ask if he was ready to go. It wouldn't have mattered if he wasn't. Wicca, on the other hand, spent a few moments hugging several Faz'reepi and suit-clad humans who had come out to see them. "Leave. Likewise." Lieutenant Hernandez shook a few hands and clasped a few tentacles before boarding the ship. Herself, the last one on board, was Sadok, Wicca's progenitor. Pograk had not yet had the chance to speak with him and wasn't sure if he wanted to. Sadok was an impressive sight even for a Faz'reepi, with heat scurrying over part of his dermis into well-articulated artificial tentacles. These injuries had been incurred during the Commander Prime Ultra's abortive assassination mission, Pograk knew. His survival had elevated him to near-mythical status among his fellow Faz'reepi. Humans respected him too, apparently, despite the fact that he was a mere astrogator. "Okay," Lieutenant Hernandez said once the outer hatch had closed, dusting her hands off as though she'd just completed a difficult task. "Earth's about for light hours away, but we'll be taking it easy on this hop. ETA will be in 1 hour's time. Bubblers and Tannarak will be suiting up, because we'll be bringing all areas of the ship up to near human standard temperatures. Except for essential emergency locations." She turned to look at Pograk and his progenitor. "You've practiced with the mock-ups we sent of your suits. We have tried them on, and they fit, the equal above all conceded. But where are my guards? Why are they not accompanying me to Earth?" "First off, trying on is not the same as practice." Lieutenant Hernandez, despite being a human, managed to hit the same chiding note that Pograk's tutors had when he was delinquent in his lessons. "Second, we've produced exactly 2 Tannarak heat suits, just as we have 2 bubbler heat suits. When we warm the ship up, your guards would be as useless as, well, as one of your heat guns on the surface of Earth. Besides, we left the public guards behind too, and you're making the effort to be nice. So we're all friends here. We will guard you, and we will keep you and your son alive to the very best of our ability. Understood. Come on, Sadek said to his daughter. Let's get suited up. You're going to have to take those socks off, though, I know, she sighed. I just like wearing them. With a parting tentacle wave to Pograk, she followed her progenitor off into the depths of the ship. Pograk couldn't imagine speaking back to his father like that. Until he'd met Lieutenant Hernandez, he wouldn't have imagined that anyone would take the equal above all to task like that either. Yet, it had happened. He hesitated, knowing that it was probably best to follow the example of the two Faz'reepi, but not wanting to act against his progenitor's wishes. Understood, the equal above all said stiffly. Come along, Pograk. If we must wear these heat suits, then we must wear them. They did not speak as Pograk's progenitor led the way back to the cabin they had shared. On the outbound journey, sure enough, where the mock-ups had been, genuine heat suits now hung on racks ready to be donned. Pograk had put his mock-up on once and was reasonably sure that he knew how it was done. His guard had assisted him at the time, so he was slower this time around. Finally, however, it beeped its approval. He was sealed in, ready to withstand any hellish temperatures he might encounter. See Part 2.